You notice I didn't say for a few moments, because this won't be for a few moments. Normally on an annual Sunday with the meeting, priest preaches a full sermon, which for most clergy is 15, 20 minutes. And then there's going to be a talk afterwards. I have always believed to blend the two together, and I will try to blend them together. I also am working from a text which I'm not usually familiar with. I wasn't trained that way, so it's going to have a different feel and sound to it. One of the things I've said to many of you before, there are certain rules. There's like the NFL, there's a playbook. There's certain rules in the clergy playbook on what to do at annual Sunday, and some of those rules, in my opinion, are a little out of touch with reality. Some of them are just plain stupid, and some of them I can't make any sense out of. But I will try to follow the rules to the best of my ability and break them when I feel necessary. Okay? So here's one of the rules. It says, you've got to be something of a cheerleader, but you've also got to yell at people. All right? Yeah, Stephen, you're perfect. Your eyes. I wish I could capture your face. That's the rule book, okay? And it goes like this. Be absolutely, totally transparent. Tell everyone everything. However, never give them enough bad news to think that there's anything wrong and they'll get discouraged. And never give them enough good news so that they can rest on their laurels and not feel they have to do any improvement, but always be totally transparent and honest. Okay? I'm not going to do any of that. Well, I am to a certain extent. I'm going to be honest. I think it's a matter of being realistic. It's a recognition that church parish is made up of people, redeemed sinners. Okay? There are some things we do quite well. There are some things we intend to do quite well. There are some things we don't do so well. And that just means we're human. We're flawed. We're disciples. We're not saints yet. Okay? No one is perfect. No one here ever was perfect. And sadly, I suspect no one ever will be. But there are things to acknowledge. The need we should always have to strive to be open in our communication, to be honest with each other, but speaking with charity, not necessarily snarky, and I'm the first one to admit I've got to deal with that, okay? The older I get, the more like Tony Campbell I'm becoming, and that's not a compliment, okay? And I will trust you to kind of hold me to that. Treating each other with respect, that includes the staff. Being open to try new things, being respectful of older ways, facing difficult decisions, welcoming new faces, new children, new members. And not being overwhelmed by what life will toss at us. And in 2019, life tossed a lot at this parish, okay? Now, the wardens are going to give a year in review, a nice presentation. It's going to be on a screen. It's going to be well written, well presented. I have none of that. John is going to give a financial presentation downstairs. Again, it is going to be well spoken, well thought out, crystal clear, and I'm not capable of that. But what I can do will offer, in the words of the hymns, words of thankfulness and praise. Because there are many people who need to be thanked in the course, and you never can say thank you enough. I truly believe that. Bill, I'm going to embarrass you a number of times today, so don't hide your head, but let's be honest. Somebody was thrown into the breach dealing with the reality of the oil tanks and the hole and the repair and the diocesan snarkiness that none of you know about when somebody on the other end of a phone can say the first words out of their mouth when we're asking for money. So how did you people manage to turn a $15,000 project into a $100,000 project? And then no one on our end of the phone went through that phone to go to the throat of the person we were speaking to. That takes class. That takes patience. And thank you. Thank you for the work you did, for the patience you showed. And there was other things. You know, the floor downstairs in the undercroft didn't get painted by itself. The leaking roof of the building there didn't get fixed by itself. Bill, thank you for so much of what you do that people don't see. Claudia, warden, Easter bunny, Christmas pageant, outside gardener. Sometimes I find her in places you would not believe. In bodily positions that I'm amazed that you can actually get into those positions, given the fact neither one of us are 21 anymore. But taking care of the place. The Church Tavern Challenge. Pinch hitting. Kathy and Veronica. Veronica's upstairs teaching Sunday school. Kathy, you guys threw yourself into a whole different type of project. We had no model to go by, the barbecue. Taking on a parish that doesn't often deal well with change. Taking on the fact you were actually staring at the heavens and saying to God, I dare you to make it rain that day. There are other people who stepped up to challenges. Cynthia and Sharon do so much that you don't see in terms of the hospitality. You never see that. You see Sharon running around with her phone doing the camera thing. And we're very grateful for that. But you don't see the other stuff that goes on downstairs. And their counterparts of Connie, who sends her greetings, she who had very serious, Connie Bobbitt I'm talking about, who had very, very serious neck and spine surgery. She had the same surgery that Joanne had, just not as many, what are it?
Vertebrae.
Yeah, not as many discs being reworked, okay? But still, and she's coming to, she sends her love, and she says that she's coming to grips with the fact that even though she's trying to charm, and you know how charming she can be and sweet, trying to charm her doctor's not changing. It's not going to take weeks to recover. It's going to take months, possibly years, from this kind of surgery. So she has to learn patience. That's going to be our parish virtue with each other. I want to thank John Q. for all the work that he does, especially in terms of getting the insurance issues done, and he and Stephen Herbert were able to make the work of the repair of St. Paul's. Now, I'm not going to talk about the painting of St. Paul's, because that really happened this year, 2020. But all the prep work and the legal work and the red tape and the aggravation leading to that all happened in 2019. So a word of thanks about that. And to Matt and Stephen, back to our attorneys, Stephen, because we have 3 of them. Matter of fact, we have 6 attorneys in the parish, 7 if you count Jenny Cox's daughter, Anna, for all the work and the opinions they give and the advice that they give, all in different ways. Ron working with ushers and always being, and this I value, a voice of honesty. Susan and Jennifer and Peter, Kathy King joining the choir and really kind of making an imprint. And Kathy also. Kathy is sort of another Ron Ross. You two have so much in common. Yes. Although one of you is obviously cuter than the other. But for the voice of honesty. Patsy and Maeve, who kind of really turn and make that choir run for Shannon. Amy, who does such work quietly at St. Paul's, and now here, and I'm going to embarrass you, I'm sorry, okay? And I often judge people by the kids that I teach, because I know kids by themselves don't, if they're really good, they don't get that way on their own. So when I work with Aiden, I think of Amy as a mom. So that's a compliment, okay, for all the work that you do. John and Sharon, for what you have brought to this parish, a moral voice. Okay, not just the voice of being a financial person. I also want to give a shout out today to Anne, who also works behind the scenes. You see her walking around in here wearing a robe. But most of what she has to do is trying to corral people to be the volunteers, and it's coordination of schedules. It's a lot of things that no one ever sees, okay? And sometimes it's frustrating. Is it fair to say you and I are always on the same page? Not a prayer. That's an open secret. Okay? On the other hand, I don't care about that. What I care is the work that you do. All right? And I don't doubt the love you have for the parish. Okay? So, a word of thanks. For little things that happen, again, that people don't see. For like when we needed music today, Paul stepping up and taking over and doing that. This has nothing to do with parish per se, but it's a parishioner of ours that I want to give a shout out to, and I want you to know about it. A couple of weeks ago, Patrick Bates received his Eagle Scout Award. And I was invited to attend. Now, I don't belong to the Boy Scout. I was a Boy Scout 1,000 years ago. But I've always been honored whenever I've been asked to give a blessing. I was asked to do the final benediction as well, but I couldn't do it because we had a funeral at St. Paul's running about the same time, and the Eagle Scout presentation went on much longer than I anticipated. I thought 2 hours between events was enough time. It wasn't. So I knew I had to run and leave, and I knew there was a final benediction. And I said, you've got to give somebody up there to do it. I didn't know that particular scout troop has an assistant chaplain. And Logan, thank you for standing in for me, leading them in prayer. That's something you learn here. Not just you learn as a scout, but also hopefully you've learned something here in this house being a house of prayer, our Father's house. So I said I was going to embarrass you. I've done it. Thank you. I won't embarrass you again. Okay? I want to thank Julianne, our parish administrative assistant, for having to do in 18 hours what used to be done in 40 hours. That's really hard. It's really hard to balance it. And also balance the fact that she has a young child And that means commitments to school, kids who get sick, things that make you have to adapt your schedule so that our schedule isn't always the same. And I saw another side of her this past week. I miss Lori very, very much, as you know, and Lori is the one who ultimately left these banners here for the church as a farewell gift. That's where they came from. Lori also left the church several years ago, my favorite toy in this place, which is this Dyson vacuum cleaner. Okay? I love playing with it. All right? You guys have your toys, I have mine. All right? And I'm in here cleaning and whatnot. Well, this thing has a filter that needs to be replaced. But the model we have now they don't make that filter size anymore. So I put her on the scent to find filters for this, because otherwise it doesn't work. And so two things happened. Number one, scouring that world of the social media, internet, whatever, she found a place that makes those filters. Number two, she was having this conversation on the phone, explaining to them, we're making an order, we are a church, we have a tax-exempt status, we'll send you the papers. And then from what I could glean from the conversation, and then she did put it on speaking for a little bit because she wanted me to overhear part of it, the person was saying, well, we don't give churches tax-exempt status, you have to pay the tax. Well, many of you who know Julianne, she has a certain voice, a certain sweetness. Before my eyes, she transformed into this mother. And she took on this voice that I've heard some of you women use with your children. They donated 2 of the filters to her. We got them for free. That is a true story. I will not tell you the words that she used. I will just say women who are mothers probably have used that language before. And I'll just leave it at that. But I wanted to say thank you. All right. I wanted to say thank you to folks like Brian and Anne-Marie who've come and joined us and stayed. And to Paul, you come and you usually sit in the back nice and quiet, but we have been in conversation and we've met and whatnot. And you keep coming either to here in St. Paul's and know that you are welcomed, and we appreciate you. We had a wonderful baptism a couple of weeks ago. Christopher's parents went away on vacation, and they came home late last night. I didn't think I would see them this morning, but whatnot. But it was the first vacation they've had in 2 years. They're here to stay. Fred, you're laughing. Why?
I can believe it, the first vacation I've had in 2 years.
To all the people who've come here and they've stayed with us, thank you. We value you. Thank you. You need to know about some numbers that I can deal with, small numbers. For the first time in 7 years, our average Sunday attendance, and it's not, they call it ASA for average Sunday attendance, but our church is average weekend attendance because it's the combination of both churches. For the first time in 7 years, actually before that, it was going down before I got here. We did not go down this past year. We actually went up a tick, okay? We are still a small Episcopal church by the statistics that they used to define parishes. We're still called a small family parish. We're slightly under 60, we average. The one thing that makes this 60 better than previous years, we for the last couple of years had an artificial number. And the reason for that was when Christmas falls on either a Sunday or Christmas Eve falls on a Sunday or Monday, those numbers get kicked into the Sunday attendance. It's because Christmas fell on a Sunday, Christmas Eve fell on a Sunday. But that, with those big numbers, pushes the numbers up. This year, because Christmas was midweek, our Sundays were our weekends were our weekends. So we actually have gone back up probably more than just 1 or 2. And that's to your credit. We're still an average Episcopal church, but we have seen new faces, we're hearing new voices, and the story of this parish is going to be written by new people, and that's a good thing. It's going to be written by those who worked hard and labored hard, but it's also going to be written by new people who are here. Now, as I told you, you're going to get all of this downstairs in much more detail and many more events that happen. But you all know about the oil tanks. I'll just say this for one last time so that you all have the same story, you understand. There were 3 tanks on our respective properties. The vestry struggled with this issue for years, but in 2018 they voted to be done with it, take the tanks out, let's see what happens, get them out of the ground once and for all forever. Just remember, yes, 2 tanks were fine, one at St. Paul's and the one right outside of here. The one by Lawrence Hall was leaking, was perforated, and had been leaking God knows how many years, how many decades. And just whether we had done it or not, it still would have been leaking. The fact that those tanks are out The issue's over. It's final, okay? That will never be a problem here again. And it took a lot of people, it took Bill, as I've said, you all know, so much time dealing with so many forms and so many people. And it was a huge project. It cost us tens of thousands of dollars, all right? It could have cost us over $100,000. In the end, it cost us around over $70,000. And I also want to give a shout out to two people, one who cannot be here today, very sad. Please keep in your prayers Jenny Cox. Those of you who have ever owned animals, you know what this is like. They got to put their dog down today. And they got to deal with the family, and it's a very, very sad time, as you can imagine. As a matter of fact, I actually went and I saw Smiley last night, and I gave him a little blessing. So that's a tough thing for any family to face, all right? But Jenny and Heather raised an issue that came up in vestry, and I want you to be aware of it because it was important. We had to tap into our savings to pay off the expense from here, knowing we were not going to get much help from the diocese. Not when we finally had the conversation and it was proposed by downtown that they would give us an additional $40,000 as a loan after we had already paid for everything. Jenny and Heather raised the issue and said, look, we've already paid for it. It's not a free loan. We end up paying interest back, which is even more money. Since we paid it off, let's just say we dealt with it. We pay ourselves back. And Stephen, you were in that room. Everyone who was in that room knows that. But I want to thank the two women for doing that. You know, for really taking the lead on that and being a voice of reason and conscience. You need to know those things that do take place. Two major fundraising events took place in the midst of all of it. As I said, you know that Veronica and Kathy took on the barbecue and did so without a pattern, without anything to fall back on, and just kind of went with their gut. I'm a person who never goes by his gut, so I kind of sit back and marvel when people do that. Again, thank you for taking the lead on that. Much more of that downstairs. When Matt took on the Church Tavern Challenge, it had it organized, and we were working along, and then Nature decided to play games with Matt in 2019, and you all know how he dealt with various surgeries. The fact that I could see you at meetings, knowing how much pain you were in, you humbled me, and I'm not going to embarrass you, I'm just going to say you really humbled me by your dedication to being here, even when I knew you were in so much discomfort. And I want to thank all the other people who jumped in. You know, once again, Bill and Fred and Claudia. Who am I missing? Peter and Paul. Thank you all for what you did. And all the volunteers, because it takes a lot of work and sweat and running about and loving action from so many people. But little things also. Things that we don't think about. You know, we had any kind of when we had the Easter Vigil here and we had the fire at the pit and whatnot, well, we got to thank Stephen King for the one who's kind of like, you're the master of fire. You're still the one who controls the fire pit. But that added so much to the liturgy. Natalie is not here today. She usually goes to St. Paul's. But her daughter, Susan, took home the Paschal candles a year ago and fixed them up so that they would reflect 2019. That's a little gesture, but it's a beautiful gesture. Because it's an act of love. Things that we thank. You guys never see Paul Bissonnette come around, and whenever we have any event, take out the signs, change the signs, deliver the signs. Event is over, go pick up the signs, bring the signs back, put them back away. Never get seen by people, okay? This past summer, the parish celebrated an anniversary. Put it in context, 260 years, okay? 260 years of worship and praise, of baptisms and Eucharist, of preaching the Word, and hopefully trying to live the Word. Now, I have clergy that I deal with, all right, and like you all know, I teach at the seminary, and I have to deal with seminarians who think they're very intelligent and, you know, witty and sharp. And I talked about my parish. I often use this parish. You actually get used as examples. Some of the people down there know your names and they know what you do, just so that you know that. But I talked about our celebrating 260 years. So this one very quiet guy, who I always thought was sort of just, you know, I never knew he had this in him, which is good. I like being surprised. And he's going to be a good pastor because he's got a snarky side to him that now I never find about him. He raised his hand and he said to me, "Your parish is 260 years old?" I said, "Yep." He said, "Do you realize You've had people fighting in a vestry longer than there have been people fighting in Congress? Because the government of the United States, under its present Constitution, is only 232 years old. The service we pray today is very different from what those people prayed. You saw that. You saw a snippet of that. You didn't see all of it at the actual event. The people who are sitting here, we dress differently. We think differently. We pray differently. We talk with each other differently. We interact with each other differently. But we're still part of this parish family, with its strengths, with its weaknesses, still redeemed sinners. Last year we did something which very few places in the diocese would ever consider doing. We, the Methodist Church and the Presbyterian Church, shared Holy Week. Okay? And Maundy Thursday was at the Methodist Church, Good Friday was at the Presbyterian Church, and the Great Vigil was here. I'm the only one left from that group. Mike Barry is now across the river in Goshen. He's the pastor there. Chip hopefully is praying for us in the fullness of the kingdom as he looks down upon us. The Presbyterians have a new minister. The Methodists have a new pastor. You're still stuck with the same rector for a while. They are very different personalities. Nikki Edelman and Reverend Dr. Mark Salmon are two very, very different people from the ministers we're used to. Okay? But we have already met. We've already agreed we're going to be doing this again because the feedback from people was so positive from all three churches. You made something happen. And you showed that when Christians get together to pray, differences don't have to be important, whether it's difference of creed or whether it's difference of perspective. There's a time that would never have happened. You made it happen, and that's to your credit. So, what about the future? 2020 and beyond. I put a notice in the bulletin that I sent out yesterday, just a reminder, this is not imminent, but I want it out there so that you're all aware of it, okay? In 2022, according to the canons of our church, I must step down. All right, there's no discussion. That is what the canon law of the church. And believe me, ignorance of the law is no excuse. I teach this stuff, so I do know what it says. All right. So there's a clock that's starting to run, and this present vestry and all of you are going to have to start preparing for a time when a new pastor will be coming. And what that's going to look like, I'm not going to be a part of that story. But you're all going to have to work together, because it's an important story if it's important for you. And finances are going to remain an issue. And you're going to have to take a look at those numbers. Buildings and grounds are going to remain an issue, and you're going to have to look at that reality. They're questions that are not going to go away because it's a truth that's not going to go away. Membership is going to remain an issue. We've had new families join us and new individuals. I think that's important. I will say this one final time. We don't go fishing in other churches looking for people who are disgruntled. But we leave our doors open and we welcome anyone who walks in. And anyone who approaches you and is interested in God or spirituality, invite them in. And when they come in, don't abandon them. Sit with them. Pray with them. Being an Episcopal sometimes is a difficult thing because we deal with books and we deal with hymnals and we're juggling things all over the place, okay? People need to feel at home. And they'll only feel at home if you welcome them and make them feel important. That's where churches grow. Or anything else, it may work, it may not work. You can buy hundreds of books and lots of articles online, but if you're not kind to people when they walk in the door, what does it mean? I said this before, I will say it again. Remember the baptism we had a couple weeks ago? That started with a phone conversation from a young woman who called up and the first words out of her mouth were, "Please don't hang up on me. I'm looking for a church and I'm looking for the possibility of baptizing our baby." That happened last autumn. And I kept thinking, what on earth, and she's not here, so I can say this now, and I'm not to embarrass her, but what did Julie experience if the first words out of somebody's mouth when talking to a priest is, "Please don't hang up on me"? We have to be that welcoming reality. I'm sorry? Somebody said, Maeve, you probably said something good. What was it?
It was rude. It's about my original religion, so I felt okay. About who she called first.
I don't know. I didn't ask. It's not important.
No.
It's really not important. And you can't be any sooner than I was when I found out, okay? 'Cause I did a slow burn that anyone should have to, anyone be treated that way, okay? Treat each other with respect. Treat each other like the other person matters. The one thing they do say, when people come into a church, don't talk about your church, talk about them. Ask them to talk about themselves. That's what matters. What brings them here? Membership in a small church is hard work. It's a lot easier to be a member of St. Bart's down in Manhattan or St. Thomas's on Fifth Avenue, okay? Or any of the larger churches. Small church, hard work. You know what that means? We are too small to have active and passive members. We all have to pinch it somehow with whatever gifts God gave you. That's going to make some of you uncomfortable. Doesn't make any difference how old you are. You know, now that I've passed a certain threshold in age, I can actually look by and say, you know what? Who cares how old I am? Right? There are still things God wants me to do. And that I say that to all of you. So I'm going to ask you to take very seriously as I end and look at the collect prayer that we have. You don't have to do it now, but I want you to take it home with you. We talk about, give us grace, O Lord, to answer the call of our Savior Jesus Christ and proclaim to all people the good news of his salvation. That was the gospel in a nutshell. That's what this is about. If church means anything, we are, first of all, the people who are graced. None of us earn it. None of us are that good. We are all graced and blessed, and we are all called. Jesus called an interesting motley group of people. He called fishermen and poor farmers and tax collectors and sinners. And I look out here and I see educators. I know there are doctors and lawyers, teachers, IT experts, people who work with finances, artists, retired folk, and sinners. That hasn't changed. It's the one thing that stays constant. But Jesus says to us, as he said to those first that followed him, follow me. Church is not a building. Church is the community that follows Jesus. That's who and what we are. That's what makes St. John's Parish make sense. Nothing else is more important. Hear the Lord, follow him, and create something beautiful. Can I have an amen to that?
Amen.
Amen.
You're getting better. I'll give you an A-. Hey, I didn't give anyone in my class an A-.